Nico, continue.
Oh no. She DC'd right as her text came up.
Oh.
She's having tech issues right now.
Oh, great.
She's restarting.
This really is a slow and painful walk for her.
I was gonna say it's in line with the narration.
Listen, it's pitch black. She can't see anything. I'd be walking slow too if I can't see.
Well, there's lights
Especially
coming out from the windows, though.
Especially considering what she just experienced.
She hasn't reached the windows yet. Also, there's no glow on the windows. They're just a little yellow.
Still enough to see.
Yellow windows.
I said it's more orange.
To be fair, though, when we were doing Final Fantasy VI, this was exactly the sort of thing I was worried about.
Tech issues.
Well, that you would have
the litany of tech and internet issues that I had because of Parsec. But yeah.
Well, we had a tech issue with To the Moon yesterday too, but I didn't find out until after
Yeah.
the recording.
Yeah, I watched a bit. I tried watching a bit of the stream, and yeah, it only showed like the bottom corner, and so yeah, someone was losing their shit in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was like how to drive somebody insane on Twitch.
I'm gonna post some more food pictures for when she gets back.
Oh, never mind. Here she is. I think.
Nika, continue. We go when you're ready.
It was a slow and painful walk back to the Moonlight. Sunlight in front of the hotel. Must have stiffness of the gate, pain inlining my face. What in God's name? Oh, sorry.
Not you.
Not you.
Sorry.
What in God's name have you done to yourself, Cassie?
Oh, what have I done?
More painful.
What have I done? Not disappear like the others, like what I've done. Look, is conscience said it all. Forced a smile in a futile attempt to ease her concern. It looks worse than it is.
I certainly hope so, because you, my dear, look about ready to shuffle off this mortal coil.
With that, she ushered inside and started treating my injuries with cloth, water, and some ferocious whiskey. Once the whiskey had won its fiery work, cleansing the wound and lurking the infection, I swinged at it in between jabs and Silas' needle, and it pulls her red. The whiskey helped her dull the pain, but not the memory of what I'd seen and done in that forest.
If you don't mind my saying so, this gash of yours is a strange one.
How so?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it appears to have already partially healed. By the length of the cut, the way the flesh is torn, I'd be expecting to see your innards.
Though the haze of the whiskey is struck me as curious that Sunlight should have such an intimate knowledge of lacerations. You train as a nurse?
A long time ago. Kept it quiet until the McFarlane boys did themselves a mischief with their crosscut saw. Dr. Harrison was out of town, so I had to stitch the lads up before they bled out. I've been tending to the community's cuts and bruises ever since.
She gave me a conspirational wink.
Just between you and me, I'm told I have rather a gentler touch than old Dr. Harrison, who I'm told can be less than tender, particularly with the womenfolk.
Lucky for me, then.
Indeed. And you haven't answered my question.
Wasn't aware that you asked one.
It was implied.
How come I heal so fast?
Yes.
Sorry, ancient Falconers' secret.
One that smells of elderberry and stains your tongue ever so slightly blue.
You have sharp senses, Sunlight.
Awareness is a gift not to be squandered, Cassie.
I was beginning to think that I'd underestimated this merry Suncliffe. While I drank and she sued, I'd make the most of this awareness of others. Asked a thing or two about the good people in Moonlight. After all, one of them was Eater. Skin bag of centipedes pretending to be human. Perhaps even Sunlight herself, though it seemed a little hard to believe considering the current situation. Why would a collar patch up a wounded falconer? Why wouldn't it make the most of my weakened state to empty my guts out onto the street Blame it on whatever accident had been fallen onto the forest. Too many witnesses? Perhaps. The street had been quiet, but not deserted. See it or not, it was time I knew what Mary Suncliffe needed. Mind if I ask you a few questions while you work, Sunlight?
On one condition.
What's that?
You tell me who or what did this to you.
Begging your pardon, Sunlight, but what I tell you depends on what you tell me.
Are you accusing me of somehow being implicated in this grievous assault you've suffered?
Do you know it was an assault?
You didn't slip and scratch yourself on a sharp twig, my dear.
True enough, and don't make it perfect. Right now, I'm accusing everyone.
Well, at least you're indiscriminate.
Out of the Falconer training.
In that case, what would you like to know?
Cassie?
About Weka. When did Wiremu arrive into town?
A bit over a month ago.
Did he say where he came from?
No, his lips are firmly sealed. Believe me, I've asked him many times. Weka keeps his cards close to his chest.
Ask her impression of the town. Did you like it here?
Yes and no.
Which came first?
This was a beautiful place when I first arrived. Not so many people, not so many houses, no big dirty hole in the ground. Of course, it wasn't even called Moonlight then.
Oh, what was it?
Blackball.
Let me guess. It is named for the place?
That's right. She has an earthy sense of humor. Oh, does our Biddy.
Oh.
After he bought the place from Biddy, George figured it needed a better name.
His name? Oh, what do you make of that?
It seems to be the prerogative of men like George Moonlight to shape the landscape in their own image.
Attitudes like Sunlight's were pretty rare among New Zealand settlers, at least as far as I'd seen. Most simply concerned themselves with foraging or living out the land only the way they knew how. Hunting, fishing, swimming, farming, and mining. This was a land of plenty. They were for taking. You had 3 choices as a colonial. Make the most of it. Go home, die. Yet colors were part of the landscape, grown out of the very wilderness. And they didn't take kindly or as humans helping ourselves in their native bounty. Fair enough. In some ways, but we have to live somewhere, and there were plenty of land to spare. Let the matter rest. I'm afraid my occupation is at odds with that sort of conjuncture. Colonial government pays us Falconers to protect settlers, and that's where the discussion ends.
Duty first, is it?
Afraid so. Sunlight seemed saddened by the response, as if she'd been hoping it was at least hear her out. I shook her off her disappointment and focused instead on my investigation. Let Sunlight talk about herself. What brought you to Moonlight, Miss Suncliffe?
Miss Suncliffe? Am I on trial now, Miss Winter?
Oh, that's your line. Sorry.
Waiting on you, Cassie.
Oh, I thought we already picked. Sorry. Assert my authority. I'm a Falconer, given the sanction of several colonial governments to investigate as I see it. Oh, no. You're not on trial, but it usually pays to cooperate with the law. Sunlight fixed an icy gaze, sunny disposition momentarily blotted out by a storm cloud of anger.
I abide by the law, but since it has no bearing on your investigation, I feel that my personal life can stay that way. Personal.
I could see I wasn't going to get any further on this line of questioning. Perhaps a softer approach would have been more advisable with Sunlight. Ask about Maggie Matthews. Maggie, did you know her well? Sunlight let out a deep sigh. There was a pity in it, a healthy salting of guilt.
I did, yes.
When did she first start seeing Wiremu?
Not long after he arrived into town, Maggie was the one to pay close attention to new arrivals. Particularly the men.
She was looking for a husband.
You and I, Cassie, we're a rare breed of woman.
Looked at me solemnly for a long moment, wrestling with something inside. It seemed that guilt won the contest.
I feel that I'm partly to blame.
For what?
Maggie, how she died. She wouldn't have been out there all day if not for me.
How so?
I tried to help the poor girl. Her father, well, bastard doesn't quite suffice, but it's close enough. She wanted nothing more than to ride off into the sunset with a knight in shining armor.
Couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that. Wiremu? A knight in shining armor?
Maggie thought so. I gave her some advice. How to speak to a man, how to listen, how to get his attention. She was a good student. If I hadn't helped her, she would never have been able to talk Weka into taking her to Giggling Glade. Perhaps she'd still be alive.
Noted in the first time that there is again Sunlight's assumption that Maggie was dead. I'd not told that. Told anyone. It was a natural enough assumption, but perhaps it was more than that. Nothing I could draw my gun on, yet something to remember. I'm sorry, Sunlight, but I'm not in the business of arguing guilt. I can only promise you justice.
I suppose that'll have to do.
That Sunlight finished the last picture on the side, snapped her thread between her teeth, and tied it off. I took a look at the wound. Clean and tidy, without mistake the work of a trained nurse, or one that had studied a trained nurse very closely. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you leave me that shirt and coat overnight, I'll get them patched up for you as well.
Moonlight's lucky to have you, Sunlight.
The town or the man?
She gave me a coy smile and then turned away to pack up her needle and thread. Did that mean that I what it meant? Then Moonlight and Sunlight? Perhaps I'd misread their relationship after all. Conversation with the captain would soon sort that out. At least, I hoped it would.
You look exhausted, Cassie. Something to help you sleep?
Yes, thank you. She went around the bar and poured a pint of Miner's Dark. Angled the glass, topping the dark brew with just the right head of foam. Get it down to fine art. My lower back was aching badly and my eyes felt like a sandpaper. Yet, needed to sleep. Yet still, I watched the sunlight as she tidied up the bar in preparation for the first patron in the evening. Behind the sunlight, Mary Suncliffe was clearly harboring some shadows. It would seem that she liked Biddy more than she let on. Captain much less. Yet, there was nothing inhuman about that. To like the oath of the human is eating, breathing. Was sunlight my eater? Didn't know. But then again, I had no way of knowing until I talked to the others. There's no telling the difference between history and lies until you lie two down, side by side. I drank my pint in silence at the first patron arrived for the evening and the sunlight got busy. At the bottom of the glass, it was all I could do is haul myself up the stairs. I left my shirt and coat in the hallway, locked the door, and slept into the bed. I think I was asleep before my head and the pillow. During the Falconers training, they told me the dream were the mildly a way of making sense of the things while you sleep. At night, I dreamt that Maggie and the tears running down her face, the silent scream of her corpse, the sound of mandible as they worked methodically through her flesh. Next morning, I found my shirt and coat nearly folded outside my door, clean and mended. I dressed and made the way downstairs. I was guilted by the smell of fried bacon. Sunlight and the breakfast ready, and someone was waiting for me. I was sitting at one of the tables, shuffling a deck of cards. He nodded good morning and went back on his work and practiced his craft. Cards danced through his fingers like courtiers at a royal dance. Kings, queens, princes, and subjects spinning in pairs and trips, falling to the table as if giddy from their cursing. I watched them as I ate, and when I was done, sunlight arrived over to hear my plate. Was Wiremu been here long?
About an hour. I believe he wants to talk to you.
There's only two things that make a man so eager to speak to a woman. Guilt is one of them.
No need to tell me what the other one is.
Sunlight grinned as she carried my plate off to the kitchen. Across to Weka's table, sat down in front of him, and tried out my most, winning smile. To be honest, though, smiling never been a talent of mine.
Glad to see you're feeling better.
I'm simply glad to be alive, truth be told.
I take it you found what you were looking for out there.
Testament to your innocence? He smiled, drew a joker from the deck, slapped it down on the table.
That would be good news, yes.
Well, I know you didn't kill Maggie Matthews.
Then that makes two of us.
I wasn't sure what to make of Weka's rather matter-of-fact attitude to Maggie's death. See if Weka's volunteering something.
Ever a hand of poker, Cassie?
Why not? I slapped a pound note down on the table. Weka placed a note down beside mine, gathered up the cards, shuffled, and dealt out two hands. I glanced at my hand. Two diamonds, queen of hearts, jack of clubs, queens of spades, queens of clubs, and a baby straight. Discard the queen of hearts. And please. Put the queen of hearts down and left my hand on top of Weka's slit smile, a new card crossing the table. I left his hand on the card so that our fingers brushed when I took it from him. Nine of clubs. Never been much of a card player, didn't have much interest in it. Life is a tough game it's without layering it with the pictures and arbitrary rules. Yet, still felt that childish rush of excitement at the knowledge that I held one Louis' hand. I stifled a smile and looked at Weka in his eyes as I tossed another pound onto the table.
You've either got a very good hand, or you're bluffing your ass off.
Call me and find out. Weka carefully took a pound from his waistcoat and placed it with the rest. Then he produced a second one, but he didn't put this one down. Instead, he played with it, holding it around with his finger. Struggling to part with your money, Wiremu?
No, but before I raise the stakes, I'd like you to answer a question for me.
It's my job to ask questions.
A lot more firm than that.
It's my job to ask questions.
I know, but if I'm going to answer them truthfully, I need to know who I'm bearing my soul to. My father taught me that only a fool trades with truth for lies.
In that case, you'd better tell me what your question is. Then I can decide whether or not to answer it.
Fair enough.
Placed upon note the others. Would have to match him, see his hand, or could raise him. The order had one provided me with so much money. This was fast turning into an expensive interview.
Why did you become a falconer?
A tough one. It was unwise to volunteer personal information during an investigation, lest that information be somehow used against you should Asira get a wind of it. But I'd also learned that the trust is a two-way road. You expect people to give of themselves, you had to give a little in turn. Tell Weka a well-placed cover story. I was only 5 when my family came over from England. From Somerset, we settled in New Gloucester.
Northland?
Yes,
I heard there's no town there now. People gave up on it. Moved on.
that's the official story, yes.
What's the unofficial story?
My sister and I, out in the bush, climbing trees in our standby dresses, risking the thrashing we'd get it with the tore or strained them.
Same here. Fresh flax across the back of the legs.
Ouch.
Kids heal fast.
We heard the shouts, the gunshots, the screams. We both lost our ribbons and we ran through this forest. We'd wandered a long way from the New Gloucester and there wasn't much left by the time we got back. Weka promised sympathy. My sister and I had helped the butchery, clean the charring meat. We sent our fair share of blood in the entrails. Or at least we thought we had.
Yeah, you never forget something like that.
I searched his eyes for a moment, gleaning a little bit of his past. That's Weka had clearly been more than his fair share of brutality. Anna went looking for Mama, told her not to. I tried to pull her away, told her we needed to leave. Anna wouldn't listen. I held her as tight of her hands as I could. She pulled away, stumbled towards a house, tripping on several limbs, slipping blood inwards. The white dress had already been when the monster took her.
Monster?
Came out of the house, red of dream arms just like Dad when he chased us around the house before he squeezed us and tickled our faces with his beard. Those great arms closed around Anna, took away, and I ran.
You were just a little girl, Cassie. There was nothing you could have done.
No, but some days it feels like I'm still running.
Did you find out what the monster was?
Not for a long time, but I know its name now. Collar.
Your parents, were they?
I didn't see what happened to them, but no one else survived.
Is that the story you tell other Falconers so that they take you seriously?
I stared at him, as if hoping my frosty gaze would stop him in his tracks. He simply smiled and pressed on. You think I'm lying to you?
Your face thinks you are. And the shortening of your breath. And the tapping of your trigger finger on the table.
Didn't even realize it, but yes, my right hand index finger was tapping out a steady tattoo on the tabletop. Pulled my arm back. What else do those gambler's eyes of yours tell you, Mr. Jones?
That you're not bluffing about your cards, but that you are about your story, Miss Winter.
I felt anger bubbling up inside of me, but it wasn't directed at Weka. It was directed at myself.
I imagine every Falconer has a story like that to tell. They killed everyone I love, so now I kill them.
I think it's time you told me your story now. Weka gave me that a charming smile of his.
I'm sorry, Cassie, but when you're wanting to make a trade, you should really settle the terms ahead of time.
This was not going to do. It looked like I was going to have to be more firm with him. Some people respect sincerity, others respect strength. It looked like Weka was of that latter persuasion. I slammed my pound note down so hard that the table shook. Startled by the sound, Cyanide looked up from the bar.
Sunlight. Is
Oh
now
my
in-
god, I'm so sorry. I hit the wrong mute. Everything all right over there?
Weka nodded and smiled broadly. He seemed to be enjoying my frustration immensely. I wanted to punch him right in his smug face. Perhaps I would. Absolutely fine, Sunlight. Sorry, I was just getting a little bit overexcited with our game. I did not look convinced, but seemed happy enough to let the matter drop. Weka leaned forward and gracefully spread his cards out on the table. Ace of clubs, ace of hearts, ace of diamonds, eight of clubs, two of hearts. Straight beats three of a kind. I had won the card game, but lost the other. I glared at him, stacked the winnings into the neat pile, and sat it in front of me.
Well played, Cassie.
I had enough of playing this game. Now it was time to play mine. I drew one of my revolvers and placed it on the table besides my stack of notes. I polished it first thing, so it now gleamed. Lamplight. Inside, the day was thick with fog. I hadn't even started to play, Wiremu. Weka looked at the gun and then at me. The smirk had gone from his face.
I imagine it's still illegal for a Falconer to murder a man in cold blood.
You'd be surprised just how far Falconers' right can be stretched. I was bluffing by the time my poker face held.
What do you need to know?
When did you ride into the Moonlight?
1 month and 3 days ago.
Where did you come from? Glanced at Sunlight to see if she was listening. She was taking good time to gather up some empty glasses a couple of tables away. Yes, she was listening.
Fort Eden.
Is that home for you? Shook his head.
I grew up at the foot of Shining Peak, Taranaki.
Mount Egna?
That's what you Pakeha call it, yes.
Did you fight in the land wars? Adjusted his position and refocused his gaze.
Yes.
Side were you on?
The losing one.
He lowered his head slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the memory. That also explains Fort Eden. A number of Maria rebels were shipped from the Portsmouth down to Fort Eden as prisoner of war. As far as I knew, they were still there working off their sentences. I'm going to ask you about the Strait, Wiremu, and I want you to answer in the knowledge that I am neither a member of a conspiracy nor bounty hunter. I'm a Falconer. It's not my job to round an escaped convicts.
All right. Ask your question, Cassie.
Are you one of the Taranaki rebels that were imprisoned in Fort Eden?
I am.
Did you escape?
A gambler's fingers need to be quick and light of touch. Otherwise, he's not a very good gambler.
You stole some keys?
The guards tended to drink when they watched us work.
Did anyone escape with you?
Would it matter?
Only if they came with you to Moonlight.
I came here alone.
Good. Slow deliberation, I took the pistol from the table and holstered it. Weka visibly relaxed.
Thank you, Cassie.
It's a strange thing to have you thank someone for not doing something.
It is. But thanks anyway.
You're welcome. Now, tell me about Maggie Matthews, and tell me straight this time.
What do you want to know?
If you weren't fond of her, when did you ask her to go out at Giggling Gate with you? Because instincts got the better of him. Glanced for the briefest moment at Sunlight. Miss Suncliffe was keeping herself busy and still very much listening in. To her credit, she didn't return the glance. Weka and Cyanide were keeping something. I needed to know that. Weka picked up his deck of cards and shuffled them, keeping his hands busy so as not to reveal his nervousness.
I was going to offer to take her away with me.
Where to?
Fort Fairweather. We were to part ways there. I planned to go to Sydney. Maggie, she was to stay in Fairweather.
Generously of you, why? You could try a charming smile on me. I'd admit it's really quite charming.
I'm a generous man.
And the real reason? Weka's smile faded away. Whether it was just another face in the repertoire, or honest feeling, he looked gently troubled.
Her father.
He was beating her?
And worse.
So you took her out of the jiggling glade and offered to take her away with you. What went wrong?
Maggie wanted more than that.
She didn't want to part ways at Port Fairweather?
She didn't want to part ways at all.
It was an opportunity to raffle Weka's cage to see what untwiddling piece of story might fall out. I could reveal that Maggie had intended to murder him after he had rejected her on that day, but that might bring unwanted attention. Keep Maggie's intentions secret. I kept him talking long enough and kept picking on any of the obvious secret things. There's been none. I didn't let her off the hook. If Dad observed their subject long enough, a seer could gather an uncertain amount of information to come to know that a person better than they give themselves. And there was something else about Weka that I simply couldn't place. Warmth, humanity perhaps, behind a well-paced composure. He felt like a man who had seen and been through more than most, but had managed to keep both his sanity and his dignity. He just didn't like color. Last question, Wiremu, if you don't mind.
Your company is not something that I could mind, Cassie.
A damn smile again. Biddy Goodwin. At the mention of Biddy's name, Weka's smile collapsed.
In the short time that I've been here, I've learned that the list of people that Biddy has threatened with grievous bodily harm is quite a long one.
You seem to be on top of it.
No, I believe that honor is held by another. I'd be a poor second.
Are you referring to Captain Moonlight?
The very gentleman.
Is he one?
One what?
Gentleman, since the professor's being something of an expert in the subject. Just look long enough, weighing his next words very carefully.
He might look like a gentleman now, but he hasn't always been. I can tell that much about him.
Interesting. Me, Privilege, and George Moonlight had looked to be lifelong friends. Had entitled to him about the only those in the upper classes could muster. At least, that's the impression he'd made with me. I didn't let Weka in on my surprise. What makes you say that? sure why, but Sunlight seemed to be happy enough to admit she'd been powerless and dropping in order to leap into George's defense.
I'll have you know that George is every bit the gentleman, Weka, and I won't have anyone suggest otherwise, not in my establishment.
Forgive me. I didn't mean to offend. I was simply making an observation.
An observation I'd quite like to hear, if you don't mind, Sunlight. Yes, Mary Suncliffe harbored a dark side. That much was evident in the glare that she now leveled with me. Then again, she hadn't built this life, a window making another own, with smiles alone. Please, Sunlight. This is part of my investigation. I need to hear this.
I thought that George was paying you to investigate the murders, not him.
There's something on the loose here in Moonlight, and I need to find out any way I can.
Cassie?
I could have kicked myself in my own teeth at that point. Novice slipped by Falconer and her first solo mission. Spear cast in the shadow across Sunlight's face. I tried to think of how long I was going to handle the situation before panic spreaded. Hindering my investigation.
Does this something have a name?
I wasn't about to announce to Sunlight, Weka, or anyone listening. It was a cedar in those. The last thing I needed to deal with was neighboring shooting each other out of fear. Reveal the truth.
Be sure to read the text at the bottom too.
Oh, I didn't see. I needed to tell them the truth, but exactly how much it was up to me. So much it could do more damage than lie in a fragile situation. I'd intervened those two thoroughly, and neither had the terrible signs of a cedar. I was just going to have to trust them. If word of what is about to tell me this spreads through this town, people will die. You understand? Weka and Sunlight nodded, and they looked at their faces, told me they understood the gravity of the situation. Good. Took a deep breath, bracing myself at the inevitable outbursts. I've managed to kill one color, a large hunter type, but there is still one more of those out there. Cedar, a type of color that acts as human. Sunlight and Weka heard this alarm and spoke almost at the same time.
Us as human?
How's this human?
Please, stay calm and the best we can. I'll find out.
How?
Let me explain. I was taught that casual conversation leads to serious discoveries. People love to talk about themselves. Even the quiet ones. But colors, they're not people. Cedar's color can do damn fine job at pretending to be a person based on what they know, but they can't know everything. Still be holes, inconsistent between what they say about themselves and what others say. Others can have known the color's victim longer than the color's has. As I saw myself out there in the forest looking for those hashtags, Cedar isn't a single creature, isn't a whole damn swarm. Usually centipedes, although other types of swarms have been documented. Cockroaches, beetles, even maggots. Multitude of horrors gather forego something truly monstrous. On their own, swarmingly, cat acts as a feed independently, coming together only when the swarm wants to impede a human. They huddle together, body crawling, legs and jaws interlocking, forming something at approximately human form. Well, the truly disgusting part. From offices unthinkable, excrete slime and resin and mold from out in the likeness of skin, eyes, hair, nails, tongue, and teeth. Yet, it's not this part, at least not in my mind. No, what's real gets under my skin is the intelligence of these things. Own. They seem no smarter than your garden variety bug. Yet somehow these foul little creatures talk to each other. No one yet knows how, although there are theories. Premonition. Body language. Sounds that no human can capture. Whatever the truth, this ability allows them to mimic humanity to an uncanny degree. See the swarm would target a member of human community, usually someone with a bit of social creep, one way or another. Sometimes an old elder. Sometimes a pretty, flirtatious girl. In fact, I've heard the Cetus favor younger subjects rather than older. Lessons to learn. Lest that could have been missed in a vibe of identity way. Over months, even years, or some of the swarm will watch and listen. They will spy from their shadows, peer thoughts of the crackles, do whatever they can to ensure what they target is being observed every minute, every day. During this time, swarms learn the marks language, speech, patterns, routines, and behaviors. Everything that needs to mimic that individual with the most horrifying accuracy. And the watching is over. And the swarm is confident that it's learned all it needs. And the target one night find themselves alone, surrounded by a crawling, ravenous horde. Who are hungry to not only their flesh and blood, but of their every life and being. I heard the Catholic Falconer once describe Cetus as Theater. The label is not without the merit. If their target comes through and disguise in place, Peter then walks amongst the community, shaking hands, trading jokes, and kissing lips. Picture of human normality. And that's when the real work began. When the Cedar does what it does best, watches and learns, digging up the community's dirty secrets, lust, dark ambitions. uses what it learns, forest rumors and lies, seductions and deceit, turning neighbors against neighbor, friend against friend, raising tensions until the community tears itself apart, a frenzy of fury and hatred.
How do you even start looking for something like that?
By doing what I've been doing, talking to people, listening to them, getting a feel for what they're about.
Did you think I was one of these, what do you call it?
A cedar, right?
Anyone could be, but you can be damn sure I wouldn't be starring this right now if I suspected either of you.
And there's still another color out there in the bush somewhere, just like the one that put that tear in your side.
Right, so.
Bloody hell!
Took a number out from the bar, grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the shelf, filled the glass to the top, and downed it. Oh. I wiped her lips and the back of her mouth, smooth hand, and then offered me the bottle.
Careful one, it's on the house.
Perhaps later, Sunlight. About time I went and talked to the captain.
Then you'll find him down at the mine. He came in early this morning for his coffee and mentioned that's where he'd be today.
Did he say what he was planning to do down there?
Get to the bottom of the accident.
It was an accident.
Sounds like you and George are of a similar opinion there.
And I best help him with his investigation. Morning mist curled about me when I walked down the street, headed down the Moonlight mine. Past George's great moonlight of a house. I could never help wondering why the rich need such grand homesteads.
Sit down, let me more discuss.
Say it again?
Sit down, let me more discuss.
Oh, I could never help wondering why the rich needed such grand homesteads. Particularly George. He had no wife, no children, no one but servants to live in all those rooms, going down all those hallways. Yet, he'd been the guest to stay, all of the hosts, visiting dignitaries and businessmen to entertain. Yet, wouldn't that money have been better spent in those Moonlight Community Hall or even the Moonlight Hotel? As I neared the mine, the vista changed dramatically. Devastation, only word I could muster. The earth ripped open like the birthday cake plundered by children. Stumps and scourges logs where ancient forest had once stood. Steam, once clear, cooned and clayfish and eels, now sluggish brown ooze stepped into sulfur and heavy metals. The mud sucked at my boots as I walked, and if hungry of the life that had been stolen from it. I heard raised voices before I saw their own homes, Cast in the shadows of the mind's grappling mouth.
Yes, Biddy, the mine will be reopened. 65 men might have lost their lives, but several hundred will lose their livelihoods if the gold doesn't continue to flow.
You don't give a shit about anyone's livelihood but your own, Moonlight.
That's simply not true.
Oh, yeah? You tell me honest now, what happens to that big fancy house of yours if there's no more gold? How are you going to pay all the people you owe money to around King George? A gentleman's financial...
A gentleman's financial affairs are his own, Biddy.
Not when that gentleman takes advantage of people's generosity, it ain't.
Might I remind you of what this town was like before I came here?
The way I remember it, the water was clean and we had damn sight more trees. And I don't remember people getting murdered by the dozen either.
There wasn't even a dozen people to murder.
Yeah, we liked it that way. Seemed to me like the colors did too.
George was clearly taken aback by Buddy's knowledge of the colors. And for that matter, so was I. Sure, George had knowledge of them, otherwise he'd never have contacted their order for assistance. But Buddy, how the hell did she know?
How in God's name do you know about that?
I've been around a hell of a lot longer than you. Seen things that'd empty those silver spoon-fed guts of yours all over the mud.
I earned my captaincy in the Crimean War. You'd be surprised what I've seen.
Buddy crackled at the witch from the fairy tale.
I ain't never seen the inside of an officer's club. You're right there. All that regaling and rogering over glasses of Madeira must have been right horrifying.
George gave a great sigh. The limits of his gentlemanly composure were clearly being tested.
Whatever did I do to deserve you, Bridget Goodwin?
Plenty, and you know it.
She took a good long swig from a whiskey bottle and then fixed George with a dreaming grin. There was no humor in it. Bright like lemon and just bitter.
That there's a pretty load of cash headed your way soon.
George looked at Biddy with the coldest regard. It even seen the man deliver.
What do you mean by that?
Insurance. Don't tell me a canny businessman like yourself didn't have a hefty insurance policy on this long drop of yours.
This long drop has brought this town a damn more sight more the happiness and prosperity than you have, Biddy.
Biddy grinned in the dark.
You know what the best thing is about shit?
No, but I imagine you're about to illuminate me.
I am. Now pay attention. Teacher's talking.
The depth of your wisdom never ceases to astound me.
Best thing about shit is that it all falls straight down. You know exactly where it's been and exactly where it's going. So Moonlight, by definition, you're not shit.
What a relief.
You wouldn't know a straight line if it bit you in the arse. Same goes for that weasel-faced lore you keep visiting.
Have you been following me?
Of course, since you stole my land, I've had nothing else to do but drink and dream about shooting you in the face.
Wicked thought crossed Biddy's face.
Did you notice there's only two type of faces for lawyers? Skinny weasels and fat possums. It's the beady eyes they have in common. Otherwise, weasels and possums, that's what you're dealing with.
Amusement momentarily took over George's pervading distance for Biddy's company.
Admittedly, Mr. Cornwallis does have a certain chubby marsupial quality about him.
I bet he loves tucking all that money of yours into his tubby belly pouch. Must have cost a pretty penny to insure Moonlight mine. Bloody dangerous pit, that is. And I bet that insurance company is fair crapping itself now. All those families that need to be compensated for the loss of their man of the house.
George's humor fled just as quickly as it had arrived.
I would advise you cease poking your nose into my affairs, Biddy.
Oh, I've not even started on your affairs, Moonlight. But then I'll not solely good Miss Suncliffe's reputation by hanging out on that bit of grubby laundry. There's lines even I don't cross.
Moonlight and sunlight? Yes, it made kinda sense. They were the closest thing a gentry around these parts, and the upper classes tended to prefer their own company. I'd often wondered about that. Most colonians had come here to escape the class systems of the old countries, yet there they were. The upper's buildings, estates, and mansions carry on like the lords and ladies of the old, while the lowers worked, bowed, and scraped as they've always done. Maybe that's just human nature. If some people are better off and some worse off, then you can feel happy in the middle.
Then it would pay to remember where those lines are with me, Biddy. There are some lines that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed.
With one narrow hand, Biddy raised old whiskey bottle to her lips. Other tested firmly upon her antique revolver.
He's threatening me, Moonlight. Should I be fearing for my safety now, like the last 65 that got in the way of your plans?
George's face darkened as he pushed back his coat to reveal the elegant pistol tucked into the shoulder holster of his side. I rested my own hands on the handle of my guns. Otto wouldn't be impressed if I stood idle while a generous donor got himself shot. And again, Biddy might have only been sloughing, and if I interceded, might push an unstable situation over the edge. Listening.
That was an accident, Biddy. Nothing less, nothing more.
I knew Jimmy Corbett better than you, Moonlight. When it came to his explosives, he didn't make no accidents.
Perhaps you don't know Jimmy Worry, as well as you think you do. He wasn't at his post at the time of the accident. He was found near the entrance, his head staved in by a falling rock.
Biddy looked genuinely shocked by that.
Jimmy'd never leave a bloody firecrackers alone, not with work going on.
That day, he did.
Don't make no sense.
Then perhaps that whiskey befuddled mind of yours doesn't know quite as much as you think it does.
Biddy squinted at George with disgust, like it was a cockroach that crawled up to his whiskey bottle.
Whether it's by me or that falconer, you're gonna get found out, Moonlight. Best keep checking that fancy watch of yours, because time's running out.
Whatever you think there's to find, Biddy, it's all in your head.
Biddy shot George one last enormous look and waddled into the mist. George rested his hand on the gun, his face impassive, as if he was considering whether or not to shoot Biddy in the back. I readied myself to draw onto him should he give into temptation. Biddy faded into gray and George's hand shifted from his gun to the fob watch. He flipped it open and nodded his satisfaction.
If you'd like to join me on my investigation of the mine, Miss Winter, we best begin. I have an appointment with Mr. Cornwallis in an hour.
Known I was there after long allowed me to hear what he felt I needed to hear. For what purpose? Did he want me to trust him? Was he hoping that Biddy would incriminate herself in some way? Manipulation like this was in keeping the cedar behavior. Such colors lived to manipulate. Yet, perhaps George was simply manipulative by nature. By the way, I wasn't about to trust him. Stepped out in from the hiding place and kept my hands close to my gun. I approached him across the barren stretch of hand. Mining equipment lay strewn about, left to lie where it had landed during the explosion. Overturned one cart there. It remained of the shattered shed there. Plenty of cover should George try to remove me from his picture of this troubled little town. But George was the cedar. It'd be unlikely to try to murder me there, despite the disturbing lack of witnesses. He would know what to ask someone about the whereabouts, most likely Sunlight. And Biddy could testify at his presence here, if not mine. Now, Cedar wouldn't deliberately draw that much attention to itself, unless it was feeling concerned and desperate. I apologize for eavesdropping, but it's Falconer's job to gather information where she may.
If you didn't, I'd have to cause to question my impending investment in your esteemed order.
The Order of the Falcon didn't need to ask for money from the like of Captain George Moonlight. I knew that much. But it seldom refused an order of monetary reward for the assistance of its falconers. It's never cheap to fight a war, especially one fought in every convincible front. While we're speaking of financial matters, is what Biddy said true about the insurance policy?
Only the foolhardy man neglects to protect his fortune.
And this insurance policy, does it extend to compensating the families to those lost in the accident?
Money cannot bring the dead back to life.
No, but it can bring some form of livelihood to a family whose breadwinner is no more.
Yes, I intend to offer support to those who have borne the brunt of this tragedy.
I imagine the law states as much.
In fact, it doesn't. It's my choice, and mine alone. These people have helped me become a wealthy man. It's the least I can do to help them in their time of need.
Actually seemed sincere about that. Perhaps Biddy was wrong about George. Perhaps he was simply a good man struggling to deal with a bad situation. Yet again, words are cheap. I'd only been satisfied with George's intention once. It seemed to make good in that promise. Just as easily skip town with all that money, set himself up in another part of the country. Word didn't spread fast in New Zealand, after all. There was a lot of wilderness between each pocket of civilization. Still, perhaps it was greater if George knew that I trusted him. Might be more likely to trust me in return. And again, while I was at the pool of the cedar, I sure as hell wasn't one of them. I tend to accept George's story. I admire your integrity, Captain.
Thank you, Miss Winter.
The first time he seemed to notice that the fresh switching of my coat and shirt and the bulk of the sunlight badgering outside.
Is there something you wish to tell me about your foray into the bush, Cassie?
I found your missing townfolk. What's left of them?
No survivors.
I shook my head.
Once we are finished here, I'll make the arrangements to have the bodies covered.
No, not yet.
Why not? Those people deserve a proper burial.
If anyone else sees what I saw out there, there's going to be a panic. It's only make my investigation harder.
So it's a color we're dealing with.
A hunter. Yes.
Despite your clearly courageous efforts, did it escape?
No, it's dead. But it had company.
Oh my god. There's another one.
Yes. So please, refrain from revealing that fact until my job is done.
If there's some form of wild beast still stalking through the bush, shouldn't we be out there now hunting the thing?
There is no rabid dog or African man-eater, Captain. Not some lunatic gone bush. You'll only be sending men to their deaths.
Then how do you propose we proceed?
You, Captain, will continue to maintain order here while I proceed as I have been trained to do so.
I see. Then are you intending to investigate this accident site with me?
When there are colors involved, nothing can be assumed accidental.
my thoughts exactly?
Of course, George had actually invited me to inspect his mind with. He could have come down here to remove some of the inconvenient evidence, or some of the double-checked that remained from a previous sweep of a place. Yet he seemed relaxed enough as he led the way into the mine's partially collapsed entrance. He took down the lantern from the nearby hook. In it, he played the light across the rubble before us. The blast had been a powerful one. For the man in the mine, at least death had come quickly. How much dynamite would take the chest in this kind of damage?
Pretty much our entire stock.
And you stored it down here inside the mine?
Safer than up top, where such an explosion could send shrapnel flying into the town.
It was true, but I'd seen results firsthand. Time when he'd arrived too late and do any job. Small railroad town destroyed in a single blast. He gathered what had happened from the previous survivors, the farmers of a family feud, and by the otherwise respected neighbors of the community. Those that lived and picked up the pieces remained in the fields for so why their former friend had acted as strangely, so viciously at the end. The answer was simple enough once we knew what the options were. That man, in the end, had not been himself. George and I walked a few minutes deeper in the mine, skirting cocktails, scorched timbers, and the shattered equipment. Took the part straining support beams and the cracks in the fissures in the funniest ceilings. Is it safe for us to be here?
Safe enough. Just don't make any loud noises.
Gave weary smile. He was joking, but I could honestly say that it gave me any comfort. Never been bold in underground spaces. All those tons of rocks and earth above it tend to weigh in my mind. Even more so knowing that the explosion might have loosened this mountain bowels somewhat. At least we came to an end of our journey. The wall challenged rock, impassive and impassable. This came down during the explosion.
It did, with 43 behind it.
I counted 65 coffins in the funeral.
Only 22 were occupied. The rest contained personal effects that family or friends chose in lieu of their loved ones' mortal remains.
Did you blast through this? Recover the bodies?
That would only court further disaster. Could even bring the whole down the mountain down on our...
His words were cut off by the sounds of disturbingly like distant thunder. Froze in the darkness and listened to what we have feared would follow. It took only a few moments for our fears to be answered. Rocks above rumbled, beams groaned, and dust trickled down upon us.
Miss Winter, I don't mean to alarm you, but I believe that now would be an opportune time to flee for your life.
I didn't need to told twice. George broke a run on the remarkable speed and agility of a man his age. Followed close to his knees, keeping in the steps the best I could, playing lamplight. The rumbling grew into a roar as if he had retreated upon lion's den and woke out the angry pride from its slumber. We're just nearing the entrance in the light at the end of the tunnel when George tripped of the fallen beam and he had charged back at a night of explosion. Went down hard. Landed, flew from his hand and shattered across the dirt, or thankfully didn't break. Picked up the lamp, then I grabbed George by the arm and hauled him into the feet. Do a wrong, getting louder, and the foot now taste the dust, loud as death, lumbering. Can you walk? His voice was hoarse and whispered. The wind had been knocked out of his lungs. Fall.
It can be better than that.
He locked off ahead of Sore, having little regard for the lady's first principle. The man was standing would normally be respected to uphold. I was about to follow him, noticed something glint in the dust at their feet. Picked up and then ran after George, catching up to us just as the two of us broke out in the open. Together we stood and looked back at the 9 great clouds of dust billowed up from his mouth. For moments, like some great growling dog warning us away, until it too died away in the dust sluggishly dispersed. Finally, walking shock of this in-death experience, I turned into George and jabbed him sharply in the chest with my index finger. I thought you said it was bloody safe.
A little bit more indignant.
I thought you said it was bloody safe. To his credit, George looked as gently rattled as I felt. It was either heartfelt, masterful piece of immunity.
It was. I inspected it thoroughly before your arrival.
So, George has been into the mine before. Engineered this to some sort of trap? But why risk himself in the process? Unless, of course, the trap went somehow weary. And what the hell just happened?
Do you recall the thunder just before the cave-in started?
An explosion?
Yes, I'm afraid so. And not one that I had sanctioned.
Then who?
I sincerely wish I knew.
My part. For my part, I had an inkling. Does Biddy know her way around explosives? George gave me a knowing nod, as if he had been thinking exactly the same thing.
She's probably the most experienced miner in town.
Would she have said a change between the time she left and the time of the explosion?
It's simply a matter of lighting some sticks of dynamite and dropping them down one of the ventilation shafts.
And the motive? Vengeance, I'm guessing?
She does rather hold me responsible for every ill that's happened to her over the past few years.
Alright. Seems like I need to have a chat without Mr. Goodwin.
I can arrange an armed escort. Biddy isn't going to go quietly.
Let's not put the cart before the horse, Captain. Falconers are bound by the principle of human until proven otherwise. That's why I don't just ride into the town and shoot everyone with a golden bullet and see if they're a collar. George took a step back in alarm. Realized then what I'd done. Still rattled by our miss. It implied that the color could masquerade as people. Let him know that I was hunting a cedar now.
Human? Until proven otherwise? Would you kindly explain yourself, Miss Winter?
I gave myself an inward kick in the head for being an amateur. Here I was, my first solo mission, and I was already blurting out hard-earned Falconer knowledge to all sundry. I wasn't even sure if I could trust George. Yes, it almost died with me in the mine, but that didn't really prove that he wasn't Cedar himself. Cedars cause strife in their nature. It's human nature to identify and eliminate those that cause strife. Perhaps one of the locals decided that George was the cause of the town's ill and had taken into their own hands to restore the peace. Chances are, it would have simply been collateral damage. And as far as I knew, the Order of the Falcon believed Cedars to be ignored of our challenges regarding their inferative nature. If such news spread the cedar to cedar, it could spell the loss of an advantage of the order. And again, I'd already known that of cedars to Weka and Sunlight. Could telling George really make the situation any worse? There was no getting around it. I was going to have to say something. But what?